Hello again. So we're still in chapter 1. This is part 2 of chapter 1 of Speech to Print. Chapter 1 is called Why Study Language. And we've just arrived at the simple view of reading, which I will repeat is basically word recognition multiplied by language comprehension is equal to reading comprehension. That seems very simple, doesn't it? And there's a reason it's called the simple view of reading, because reading is quite a complicated process, but it's good that somebody has basically created this formula. So what is comprised in word recognition? What happens when we see the word cat and we just see cat? We don't think C-A-T, or we don't think at. We just see cat, and even in our heads a mental image of a cat pops up. How does that happen? Okay, so first of all, you need a knowledge of sounds. Okay, you need to know the letters, and you need to know the sounds, and you need to be able to correspond the letters to those sounds in a way that makes sense. Okay, you also, as you begin to develop, you need to be able to understand syllables and how to break down syllables. So there are a few different types of syllables. You need to be able to go between them. I know many of us have at one point or another read a book, and then especially with names, and read a book and found a new name that we had never heard of before, and maybe had an argument with our friends and family about how to pronounce that name. And we find out that one or the other of us is correct. But both of us may have been following syllabic rules, okay? But maybe we were using the incorrect one. Maybe we were using an open syllable when we should be using a closed syllable. And yeah, that's basically, it's really, really important to be able to break down words. But we should know that perhaps we need to try it more than one way. Okay, so we need knowledge of sounds, we need a knowledge of syllables, we need knowledge of letters, and we need a knowledge of the meaningful parts of words. So down to the morphemes, the basic, smallest meaningful part of a word. So for example, it means to not do something, or to undo something. To go over it and make it as if it never happened. Okay, so that is a very small unit. The S that indicates plurality, okay, to show that there's more than one of something. That is a morpheme. It has a meaning. Okay, so once you know those, it really has an impact on your word recognition. Okay, so you need to know the sounds, you need to know the syllables, you need to know the letters, and you need to know the meaningful parts of words, and you need to have built this up in your head to be able to recognize them as words. So being able to read supercalifragilisticexpialidocious in a meaningful way. Okay. So then, remember, the simple view of reading is word recognition, which is knowledge of sounds, syllables, letters, and the meaningful parts of words, and being able to combine them all together to create a word, multiplied by language comprehension. Okay, so what's involved in language comprehension? This is kind of like the higher level, or so we think, of reading, which is meanings of words, meanings of phrases, meanings of sentence, meanings of discourse, which is the overview. Okay, so first is the knowledge of the sounds and syllables, and then and the smallest meanings of the meaningful parts of the words, and then you multiply that by language comprehension, which is the overall meanings of each individual part and their relationships within it. And that's what creates reading comprehension. Very simple. Okay, so let's go back to word recognition. In word recognition, we have the alphabetic symbols that correspond to speech sounds. And in order to recognize the word, we must be able to make those connections almost automatically. Okay, and that's how we build our memory store. And this is, as I said in the last video, reading and memory are intertwined, and it's really, really important to be efficient users of our memory and our expectations for our readers as well. So for example, memory is hampered when your focus is on one part of reading. So for example, somebody who's at the pre-word recognition stage, they're decoding, they know the alphabetic symbols, but they find it hard to blend. Expecting them to comprehend a text is a big ask, okay? But once they start developing those word recognition skills, it's time to start building their comprehension skills. And then that's when we go into language comprehension. So we move from word recognition into language comprehension. But they're not separate. And as you continue through your schooling, you will continue to encounter new words or words that are used in different ways. You'll encounter old words that somehow have a separate meaning to your original understanding of the word. And then you have to, build on that. Okay, so let's look at that. That's what we're going to now, language comprehension. We need to not just recognize the word and know what it means. We need to be able to interpret the words. We need to interpret the phrases, the sentences, and connect it all together to create the overall meaning. It's an active process, and we're constructing the information in a very elaborate manner. Okay? Now, I'm just reading from my notes here just to remind myself of what I said. Integrating ideas from one sentence to another. So think about the sentence, he went to the shop. At the shop, he bought a Mars bar. On his way home, he ate the Mars bar so slowly. So each sentence builds upon the one before. Now, if you are at a pre-word recognition stage, you may not completely understand what you've just read. Okay, and that's why the language comprehension part is so important, because you begin to integrate the ideas, and teachers should facilitate this through very experienced questioning strategies, independence-based strategies as well, where you ask the students to maybe draw a picture of what's happening in the story, maybe write a quick summary if they're ready for that, and so on and so forth. But not only that, making connections with one's own background knowledge and other sources. So your pre-existing knowledge is so vital to the act of reading. As I've stated many times before, if I was to read a book about football, I think I might not remember one end of the sentence to the other. Not because I can't decode, but because I have such a limited understanding of football and knowledge of what it's all about. And it doesn't really capture my interest. Okay, so my connections will be limited. So I might test out of that as not a very good reader. Okay, so it's really important to build on your background knowledge, and when you're encountering or teaching a new text that has something maybe a little bit different, is to identify what their existing background knowledge is, and then perhaps even before you read the text, maybe pre-teach some information. Okay, so the other day I was teaching about the pharaohs and Egypt, and I showed a video, I asked some existing questions, I had a baseline of where my student was at, and when I felt she was ready for the text in terms of the information, we went into it, and she, at the end of it, she was really enthusiastic because she didn't feel overwhelmed by a lot of unfamiliar vocabulary and a heavy text. Okay, so it's really, really important to begin your students at that level, at the level where they should know something about it before you begin. And it's not cheating. I mean, it's cheating if you give them a summary and you tell them exactly what the text is going to be about. But if you just fill in the blanks of the background information that they need in order to be properly conversant with the text, so that their reading is almost a two-way process, then I think that is this is what experienced and informed teachers would do.